Thank you for joining us. My name is Felicity Ezewiike. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the World Press Freedom Day, a day to celebrate the fundamental principles of press freedom, assess the state of press freedom, and pay tribute to journalists who have lost their lives in the line of duty. An analysis of the 2023 World Press Freedom Index by Reporters Without Borders shows that though Africa has seen few significant rises, such as that of Botswana, which rose 35 places from 6th to 5th position, journalism overall has become more difficult in the continent, and the situation is now classified as bad in nearly 40% of its countries against 33% in 2022. The analysis describes Africa as the new disinformation and propaganda laboratory and still very much a high-risk continent for journalists. A total of 5 journalists were killed in connection with their work from September 2022 to January 2023. But it's not all gloom. Of special mention is Seychelles overtaking Namibia at 83% as the continental press freedom leader and ranking 13th globally for press freedom. In reaction, the chief editor of the Seychelles news agency and chairperson of the Association of Media Practitioners there, Raisin Vanier, says the contributing factor to Seychelles having a high percentage of press freedom is due to a lack of political or social conflict. We have that in almost all parts of Africa. I mean, political and social conflict. So where does that leave us? My guests are here. I have 4 guests. This conversation is divided into 2 segments. The first part I have Samkelo Mokine, Freedom of Expression Institute Executive Director. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's in Johannesburg, South Africa. I also have Ibrahim Al-Hassan. He's a journalist. He joins us from Ghana. It's a pleasure to see you, Ibrahim.
A pleasure is mine as well.
Let's start with you, Samkelo. You have been around the block a while. From your vantage point, give us an overview of the state of press freedom in Africa. Aside from, was any of the things I said in my introduction out of place?
No, the analysis was definitely not out of place. There are bright sparks here and there in terms of countries, but the overall picture still is looking rather concerning for Africa. As and when the description around social and political unrest was described, a lot of countries are undergoing that, and the poverty, throwing poverty into that equation, and people that are really ready to, despite all those problems, are ready to steal public funds, but yet do not want to be discovered, or even when they're discovered, they don't want to be reported upon. Just makes the situation bleak.
Ibrahim, tell us about press freedom in Ghana.
Well, so relatively, I can say that there is some level of press freedom in Ghana. In fact, it used to be, this country, Ghana used to be the bastion of press freedom until about, give or take, 3 to 4 years ago, when an investigative journalist, of course, this story is well known, Ahmed Hussein Swale, got murdered in a Hollywood Rambo style, right in front of his house. Of course, he worked with the Tiger IPI belonging to Anas Aremio Anas, a very well-known investigative journalist. He based here in Ghana. As we speak, Felicity, years down the line, the perpetrators of that heinous crime have not been arrested. In fact, the police don't even have leads as we speak, and that has caused the country to drop on the world ranking. In fact, per the report released this year, Ghana has actually dropped further by 2 points relative to our press freedom index. And so, by and large, we as journalists are able to go about our activities without so much fear. And like I said, it used to be so much comfortable as a journalist carrying carrying out your duties until Ahmed Suwale was murdered. Again, there's also what you can describe as a systematic oppression of the media. And that one doesn't come in a more pronounced form. So that's what I mean. So you do a story against the government. The government itself might not come against you, but it assigns and supporters. And they take you on social media. Some even send you messages threatening your life. Some might not necessarily threaten your life, but they will call to, in a way, find out why you did what you did under the veil of seeking for explanation. But you can well tell that they are telling you that you've done a story against government or somebody they support. And for that matter, they are letting you know they are unhappy about it. There's another established way of media oppression, and that's by way of advertisement publicity, where the state machinery, government, will deprive your media house of revenues by way of advertisement because your media house is critical of that particular administration one way or the other. And this has been the challenge here in Ghana.
Ibrahim, you seem to be yes, you seem to be recounting what's happening in most parts of Africa. I can relate intensely. My introduction to journalism full-time was threats based off of what I said on air many years ago. So it still persists today. Let me come to you, Sam Kello, and ask the experience that Ibrahim is sharing. Is it something you're hearing from journalists around you? What are they telling you on this day?
Yes, there are a lot of similarities, and the issue around even just, we've got a wide gamut of the kind of threats that journalists face, whereby on the one hand, it will be somebody that body shames a female journalist, either you are too overweight or what have you. And it can go through threats of beatings, and if you are a female, open threats of raping you if they disagree with an opinion that you have or the reporting that you've done as a female journalist, right through to people that have been physically attacked, and those that, have had attempted murders on them. So it's a wide gamut, and it's quite concerning as well in the sense that you sometimes have a difference in the sense of national media, whereby there are prominent journalists that are out there in the media. And then you have journalists as well that work for community media that are equally under threat, but their plight is sometimes not as highly prominent as with national media and journalists.
All right, in my introduction, I'm still staying with you, Sam Kello. In my introduction, I relied heavily on data provided by Reporters Without Borders. I did ask you if there was anything untoward in some of the information that I shared. But I think it's imperative for those that are not in the field to ask this: how much credibility should we be putting on such index? And the second part of that question is, what purpose does it really serve, and has it served over the years?
In terms of the purpose, I think it's helpful for ordinary citizens that are not in this field of either journalism or media, just to have a sense of where their country lies in terms of journalistic freedoms. And when you have an index like that, it's not a something that is meant to be very gratifying only for the people that are compiling the index. It's there for a purpose. And throughout the years, one can see that if things have improved in a particular country, maybe let's say South Africa, there is movement up the index. So it's not as if any improvement is not recognized. And if there is a drastic number of attacks on the media and killings and whatever else, your country drops. It's good that people have a sense of where their country lies, and it serves the purpose of either encouraging good deeds or discouraging bad deeds. But all in all, it is for the interest of the wider public that you have a very free media and a media that's able to report both bad and both good, so that people don't end up either self-censoring or being censored, and the media and the public receiving information that is not really reflective of the truth.
We'll come back to that index really, because I created most of the question of reading some of the findings there. But first, let's talk quickly about the relevance of this year's theme. I'm taking my question to you, Ibrahim. It's shaping a future of rights, freedom of expression as a driver for all other human rights. If freedom of expression is a driver for all other human rights, what begs the question, with all the challenges we seem to be having with having that right? Ibrahim, did you get my question? Okay, I'll send that to you now, Samkelo. We'll get Ibrahim's opinion when he joins us again.
Yeah, freedom of expression is not only a driver, but it's also an enabler of other rights. And, I use examples like South Africa, for instance. Quite a number of years back, we had a huge health problem in terms of HIV and AIDS infections. I think we have the highest number of people living with HIV and AIDS in the world. And the government here was dilly-dallying and theorizing about the plight, and literally thousands of people were dying. And it is only through the fact that we had a free media and freedom of expression is a right that's enshrined in the Constitution, that the media was able to cover and punt the issues around HIV and AIDS. And today we've got the biggest antiretroviral treatment regime or program in the world. Like over 7 million people in my own country are able to live relatively decent lives and for longer because of this freedom. And a couple of years back as well, there was a number of workers, mine workers, who were fighting for an increase in their wages. And police were sent onto the scene, and police killed those miners, in full view of television cameras. And that, shocked the nation, that after all the horrors of apartheid, here we are having a democratic government where workers are shot dead in front of, everyone. And it is those things whereby labor rights, like the labor rights that those workers had, the health rights that the public has had, that are bolstered by the fact that we have a respect for freedom of expression, and we make sure that those things are covered and outlined to the wider public.
All right, I think we have Ibrahim back. I'll come back to you again, but let me ask him this question away from, you've already spoken to us about the theme for this year. I want to speak to you on your thinking with this data that a total of 5 journalists were killed in connection with their work just from September 2022 to January of this year. The countries that were mentioned were Cameroon, Kenya, Somalia, and Rwanda. Reporters Without Borders is of the view that even if investigations are opened, they do not always lead to the identification of the instigators. What is being discussed among journalists when we hear things like this, people dying for a job that they love?
Well, Felicity, this is alarming. 5 people dying within that short space of time. in their line of duty is alarming, and this will be discouraging to the faint-hearted and even the bold. Now, you talked about investigations. The challenge is this. Many a time, the perpetrators behind these heinous crimes are the same entities tasked with the responsibility of investigating. So we have other countries where, for instance, the police force or the police service is used to intimidate journalists. So, and in my country, of course, for instance, there have been reports of police intimidation of journalists. There is a protest, journalists are deployed to go and cover the protest, and they get into altercation with police people. In fact, there's a colleague journalist of mine who works with a multimedia group in Ghana called Latif, who is now permanently scarred as a result of an altercation he had with a policeman who used the button of the gun, the weapon he was wielding, to his head, to kick him in his head. So the challenge is that many institutions are being used by governments across the continent to intimidate journalists. And unfortunately, it's the same institutions that we are asked to report to whenever we find ourselves into trouble. So for instance, if you are pursuing a lead and your life is under threat in your line of duty, you are told to report to the police. What if that threat is coming from the police? So in Ghana, government has decided to tap more or less like a desk where journalists who feel threatened in their line of duty can report. That's a good starting point. But you ask yourself, when a report is done, what becomes of that report? And so to tie this in with the team, as you mentioned, Felicity, I can tell you that if journalists are allowed the freedom to pursue their work, they champion the human rights of virtually everybody. In fact, freedom of speech is a fundamental human right. So if those who are supposed to ensure that others have their voices heard and amplified, and I'm talking about the journalists, they themselves have had their voices curtailed and impeded one way or the other through the lack of freedom for them to pursue their work, then the entire nation, and for that matter, the entire continent, is in trouble.
That's indeed the truth. That's indeed the truth, Ibrahim. In the interest of time, I would have to interject so we can wrap up. As somebody who has been in the practice of journalism, what hopeful words, in 30 seconds, if you can, will you share with your colleagues to keep the faith and continue the good work?
Well, first of all, the interest of the masses, the national interest. That must be paramount. So if you are pursuing a story, you're doing your work, and you're in the larger interest of the entire nation, and for that matter, the continent. But I must say that no story is worth your life. So if your life is in danger, take all those precautions that we've been told. So first of all, share your whereabouts with your colleagues. Don't pursue any investigation without the buy-in of your media outlet. If you're a freelance journalist, then ensure that you get a needed protection.
A very important advice.
Threat, report it.
Very important.
Many colleagues of mine have had to even abandon the country. Yes, as a result of that. So your safety first.
Your safety first. That's the summary. Thank you very much, Ibrahim, for your thoughts. As Sam Kello, in 30 seconds as well, what would you say to journalists across Africa and even the rest of the world in commemoration of World Press Freedom Day?
I'd say, if not you, who must give the public the truth? And with that, I'd just like to say that we know it's a really tough job at times, and that a lot of your colleagues have died, some have been maimed, some have been imprisoned, but that in the end, it's worth it.
It is. It certainly is. Thank you very much, Sam Kello, for speaking with us as well.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go on a very short break, and when we come back, we'll take the conversation towards the impact of digitalization in the media space. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We're still looking at World Press Freedom Day. We're focusing on press freedom in Africa. In the first part of this conversation, we got a bit of a background on what it looks like to operate in Africa, and there were some key advice given to journalists by a colleague, Ibrahim. I now have joining us for this part of the conversation, Kasim Akireti, former Lagos NUJ chairman, that's the National Union of Journalists in Nigeria. Thank you for joining us. Okay, as soon as he joins, I think he had to go off. As soon as he joins us again, we'll bring him on. But live now is Laban Cliff Ontario. He's a journalist from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for joining us. Let's start on a high note by asking what the commemoration of this day looks like in Kenya and what are the concerns being raised?
Thank you very much for having me on this show as well. I think it's great celebrations to any journalist who's based in Nairobi and in the region. Nairobi is indeed a hub for journalists operating in East Africa. We also have the Foreign Journalists Association, so we have many other journalists representing international media who are here. Ideally, what the day would look like is that you'll see a lot of tweets and updates regarding various organizations just wishing the press a happy Press Freedom Day. You might look at it as more of a public relations scheme, but more often than not, we see a lot of, especially government agencies, we have legal firms, legal associations, to just try and really, show that they are part and parcel of promoting press freedom. I should say from the docket that handles the press, that's the Media Council of Kenya. We have the association that we have the annual journalism festival, which is basically the Ministry of Information just trying to promote the journalism excellence, trying to promote those who've been excelling in sports journalism, in business journalism, in political reporting. So that will culminate in an annual journalism awards ceremony that will be taking place later on tomorrow. So a bit of a, quite of a buzz activity, maybe nothing much to write home about in terms of, the activities on ground, but online, we're seeing a lot of conversations taking place.
Since we're talking online, before you came on, I did say that we'll be looking at the digital space and its impact on the journalism practice. It is a growing concern, what's going on there. The 2023 index, that's the Reporters Without Borders on press freedom, spotlights the rapid effects that the digital ecosystem's fake content industry has had on press freedom in the continent and across board. They are saying that the difference is being blurred between true and false, real and artificial. So in measured terms, how is this, to your understanding, jeopardizing the right to information? Because, I mean, there's a lot of information out there, but is it the right one?
Very good question. I mean, it's you're spot on. If you look at how the digital space has kind of molded this press freedom space in the country today, and I'll say actually in the world. I also sit on the Reuters Institute, which is as a Reuters fellow from the University of Oxford, where we do analysis on the different media spaces and the impact on fake news, misinformation, and the list goes on. And rightfully so, with the advancement in technology, with citizen journalism, with everyone on the ground sharing information and not really having a proper verification mode, that has really jeopardized, press freedom, if you look at it, and the ethos of media freedom, because now everyone can really share news, everyone can really share information. Yes, that has been opened up, but that has been really, really difficult. Not to cast aspersions, of course, we've had opportunities where the Communication Authority, that's the the authoritative body in Kenya mandated to look at how to really rein in on this fake news. The Communication Authority has brought in the likes of Meta, of Google, of these tech giants. Just come onto the table and see how do we ensure that this rise of misinformation in the digital space doesn't quite really go to unmanaged levels. So it's quite interesting to see the strides, particularly in the previous elections. You know that Kenya just came out of a general election, and it's during this period that usually it's a great hype, it's a great opportunity for misinformation. So we've had that in Kenya. So the communication authority has done its work here. In Uganda, we saw the same effort. You remember that Meta, Facebook at the time in Uganda was shut down. Now that conversation kind of came onto this side that, hey, are we going to have the same thing here? But that did not happen in Kenya. But we're seeing a lot of reining in on this misinformation, fake news peddlers, if I may say so.
Yeah, I mean, the space is here to stay, whether we want it or not. The digital space is permanently upscaling. So while we know that it is fraught with a lot of challenges, how can journalists adapt to the changing ecosystem? Do they have the tools to do that even?
Good question. They have the tools, yes, but how fast are they to adopt? I think it's an issue of mindset, to be honest. I mean, when you see your cheese moving, it sends you into a disarray or into a form of worry, because you look at you're perhaps a newspaper writer, and it was being very difficult to actually just try and break news on paper, because break news will actually break news more digitally. So yes, you need to adapt. Do we have the tools? Yes, you have the tools, but is the mindset, is the drive there to change? Is the drive there to go into the digital front? Maybe not quite as much, but we're seeing a bit of strides. Of course, with the likes of the Digital News Report, thanks to Reuters Institute, with the help of the Meta, the conference of the Meta News Partnership Project, and also the Google News Partnership Project, where you're just trying to give journalists the tools and the opportunities to actually just advance to be at the forefront, if I may.
Okay, let's see, there's this concern, again, aside from the digital space. I would want us to explore that conversation a little more, but I'm looking at time and seeing how much we can cover with what we do have, what time we do have. So there are quite a number of concerns about foreign influence in the media in Africa and how this is having an impact on press freedom. Some are saying there is manipulation, so free will is not even, making choice is not from informed free will, but from manipulated press information. What's your thinking on that?
I think I sit on the fence on that because the opportunity for the digital advancement, yes, has caused opportunities for growth, but also looking at how the government has handled it, I must say I sit on the fence because with press freedom, with the digital space, with the advancement of the digital space and all, there's been a good opportunity towards the press just coming out boldly and just saying, hey, we can actually do this, and we have an opportunity to do it. But we're seeing how regulation has come. Normally, regulation just catches up. It's just catching up with technology. Sorry to say, but in this part of the world, it takes a bit of while before the government can actually kind of create rules and procedures in how this will be done. So I sit on the fence because I think we still have a lot of work to do, particularly in regulation of the press. But with the digital advancement, with the partnership with international organizations, and particularly the tech giants, there's an opportunity for that. But for now, we are far from getting there.
Well, there are still those who are skeptical. They're saying that the funding that is brought in by foreign media sort of dwarfs the effort of local media in terms of being in the fore of press and the freedom of expression in Africa, that these huge funding that seems to come sort of manipulates the narrative in a way that is more suitable to the agenda of those who own these media outlets.
I agree with you, Shoma. There is an opportunity for local media to stop acting as one, but also come together and do it and collaborate in ensuring that actually in the advancement and in the advocacy of press freedom, they can actually do it together. So is there strides? Is there opportunity? Yes, there is. But is it concerted? Is it together as a media industry? I would say not, because we have various, say, state-owned media, private-owned media. We have, this digital growth and what have you. So I should say the opportunities there, but the lack thereof has been just coming together, the collaborative nature of the press just come together and act as one.
All right, I understand we have Kazim Akireti, the former Lagos NUJ chairman, that's National Union of Journalists in Nigeria. Thank you very much for giving us your time. We've been waiting for you. Just go ahead and jump in, sir. Tell us about what journalists in Nigeria are saying in commemoration of World Press Freedom Day.
Yeah, I think, yes, today is also a very auspicious occasion for journalists in Nigeria. First, to celebrate freedom, and also to reflect on the sort of, challenges that face journalists in Nigeria. There's wherever you have a right, there are always some encumbrances. We have had quite a lot of, challenges with regards to fundamental human rights of journalists. Journalists have been detained, journalists have been maimed, journalists have been killed in Nigeria. But the reality is that in the last 4 years, no journalists have been killed. But of course, harassment of journalists has continued in one way or the other. What is also important is that journalists are also standing up to their rights in Nigeria. But beyond that is the challenge of citizen journalists, those who are not trained journalists, those that call themselves citizens, who obviously believe that they can just do anything, that they have the freedom to broadcast, freedom to write, freedom to say whatever they just want to do, without recourse to two fundamental issues. These issues include: what is the public interest? And of what public good is the material that you are putting forward? And so, because they are not trained journalists, they can decide to just put anything on air, or write on anything, or comment on anything.
But that's the new reality. Before you joined, I think even in the previous, I spoke to Laban Cliff about it, the digitization, the digital space. It's here to stay permanently. Everybody has the tools to do the work that was originally done by journalists. So the question would be, how are journalists trying to maximize this evolved space in Nigeria? What are they saying to you in terms of adapting to the new changes and seeing better ways to make a difference, to make a distinction between journalists, citizen journalists, and trained journalists?
With respect to that, there are two things that are quite fundamental. One is for you to verify your stories. When you verify your story, you also need to justify the story. And in justifying it, you must put into consideration this story I'm putting across, information I'm putting across, is it in public interest or for public good? Either way of the divide. You cannot just put a story out to cause dissatisfaction in the society. Because you must have a society before you can practice your trade as a journalist. And so that's a clear call as it is now. That look, there are so many fact checks and opportunities that are available for you to know, is this really a good story, or is it a
manipulated
news? Or is it just a manipulation? A quick example is the photo shoot of the president-elect and the present kind of Labour Party. This was put out in a bad taste. Apparently, the Labour Party prayer candidates has not visited the president-elect.
Okay.
What they did was just impose his picture alongside one of the visitors to the president-elect at the what do you call it? At the flag house.
Yeah, so a lot of situations like that exist. Yeah.
So it is our responsibility as journalists to curb this. Because the reality is that there's going to be so much of disinformation, there's so much of fake news, and then the credibility of any news stories you are bringing up, people will just look at it. Is it real?
So
People-
journalists, you're basically saying journalists can use the professional tools available, including
They're quite
fact-checking,
available.
to
Yes,
distinguish
fact-checking tools are
themselves.
there, and they're
All
quite
right.
fine for us.
All
Because
right.
the mainstream media must remain in business. And for us to remain in business, we must ensure that all these fact check tools are really there with us, and we use it very, very well.
All right.
And that's one of the reasons why we're going to be credible.
Okay, in the interest of time, let me quickly go to Laban Cliff for your thoughts on what future, quickly, maybe in 40 seconds if you can, what future you see for press freedom in Africa.
Thank you so much. I think the future, I wish I'd have a crystal ball to actually say how this is going to look, particularly being fueled by the digital transformation. But the future definitely is, when you asked about the tools, when you asked about the opportunities, they are all there. But we just need to have a concerted effort in ensuring that, well, as much as it might look bleak on one end, we leverage on the tools and the opportunity and the networks among us journalists, particularly not only in Kenya, across Africa as well and across the world, to see then how do we come together by the digital transformation to actually just grow and see how to work on it. That's on the side of delivering our story, the side of doing our job. Now let me put in the side of working with government, the side of just ensuring that also government is at the forefront. Now, there's always a question from journalists, which is, it's an us versus them, which is, you know, like a push and pull. But more and more where we're going, and that can even see what the UN is calling for, is more partnerships, more collaboration, together with various other organizations, so that even as we advocate for press freedom, and of course here looking at it and champion relating to government, we also see what government also has to say, has to contribute, because the press, and rightfully so, as my previous speaker said, is that, you know, some media houses are in the business of also making money and paying the employees, yes, but you also need to ensure that also you understand what the government's priorities are within the jurisdiction of where you operate.
Yeah,
So,
collaboration. Collaboration basically is the future. We have to find a middle ground. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we do, for sure.
All right.
And calling for more collaboration.
All right, my director is telling me we're out of time, but I'll just give 30 seconds to you, Kazim, to quickly tell us, how do you think journalists can protect themselves from harassment and persecution? Okay, let's make that just 1 minute, sir, please.
Okay, it's quite fine. Please understand the basis of the ethics of the profession. Live within the confines of the ethics of our profession by being truthful, being objective, and build a trust, you know, with the community, with the people, so that anytime there's a news story, the level of credibility will never be in doubt. And that's what I'm of the opinion, that the new ombudsman established by the Nigerian Press Organization in Nigeria will help us a lot. People have a right of reply. So if the media also err in terms of the news that have been out, people should write the ombudsman to seek for redress. If
Right.
the Nigerian Press Council is not really going to work.
Right of reply. We should all have that at the back of our minds. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for sharing your time and your candid thoughts with us on the square.
Thank
Thank you, Bobby.
All right, it's all been said. There's nothing much I can add other than to remind us all that press freedom is crucial to the development of a democratic society. It is imperative that African governments understand this and work towards creating an enabling environment for journalists to work without fear of harassment or intimidation or persecution. This is the only way to empower the media to perform its watchdog role effectively. And in doing that, they will support the realization of good governance and sustainable development. That's where we'll leave it for today. I thank you very much for your kind attention. I'll see you next time.